It's called reflections.
Okay.
So not all the questions will work, but you can just answer what you feel like. What did you learn the hard way?
I learned somewhere between high school and halfway through my first college experience that I could no longer get by just by showing up. That I had to learn to study and to be diligent and discipline myself mentally. And I learned that. And it affected me for all the rest of my life. I think if I hadn't have been going to college, I would have not learned that somehow.
Right. Tell me a time when your life took an unpredictable turn.
Okay, this is something very few people know about. We had been spending a lot of money on the farm. I was putting up the money. Mark Harrington was working for me. We were using we had three dirt moving machines. We were dead leveling the land. And he and I got together and made a decision that which we had already done, we could go ahead and plant it to cotton and get ready to plant it into cotton in May or sometime. And the dead leveling of the land took the topsoil off, and so the crop was a total failure. And I was behind. I lost about $160,000 that year from what I had spent leveling the land, and what the crop we produced was very minimal, and and I was faced with losing everything. And at that point, I'd had 2 or 3 other difficult experiences like that where things didn't turn out anywhere near what I anticipated. And I just had to roll my neck and decide how else can I do this. So that's when we decided, your mother and I, to sell the ranch up to Clifton Morenci. We got enough money out of that to pay off the obligation we owed to the lending agency, and that brought us to zero. We were broke. Not very long after that, I decided I better get back in the law business. and at first I was very, very disappointed in myself. But my nature is such that I quickly shrug my shoulders and say, well, I can't change what happened last year, but I can be in charge of what happens this year. So away we went. And that was a very difficult time. I had inherited $60,000 from my father's estate when he died. All of that went into that. That's part of the money that we lost. And but I'm an optimist, and I shrugged my shoulders and went on. And I hope that's one of the very difficult low points in my life, is when that happened. But there we are. We go ahead.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Pardon?
I did not know that. I knew that you went into the law practice, but I didn't know the circumstances. Yeah.
I couldn't get financing again.
Tell me about a time when you felt unexpectedly overcome by love.
Sure, a couple of times. This morning, I did a little bit of I mean, not more than a fourth of a cup, and I threw that up. But she really didn't feel nauseated.
Two kinds of love. One, love for my wife. We were, I don't know anything about how other people's marriages are, but I knew what mine was. And sometimes it was almost overwhelming. It seemed like it was too good to be true. Here was this beautiful, lovely, intelligent, sharp, pleasant person who was my wife. We'd been sealed in the temple. And we had all these children, and I loved them almost equally. And sometimes that was almost overwhelming to me.
Oh, have you seen Mom's grandson?
Sometimes when I'd be working up at the ranch, I remember specifically times up to the milk ranch, which is the farthest road we had up there, and we had a little camp trailer up there, and I was sleeping in it. And when I'd wake up in the morning, I would have these overwhelming feelings of, back home I've got this lovely woman who loves me, and we're close to each other, and we're going to be all right, and all these children, and those feelings early in the morning when I would first wake up and didn't have to be thinking about the bulldozer were very, very beautiful times for me. I remember every time I'd come back from the ranch, I would ask my wife, "Is Kennedy still president?" and one morning he wasn't. that evening, I had a little tiny radio, and I would listen to the news and sometimes listen to the Los Angeles Dodgers baseball team. And that night they announced that Kennedy had been shot and killed. And so I didn't ask my wife when I got home if he was still president.
I remember listening to the baseball games on the radio with you sometimes at the ranch.
Yeah.
What were some of the best ideas you ever had?
Do you like pecans?
I love pecans.
One of the best things we did when I was in the stake presidency is when we'd have a ward. What is it? A ward? Not a reunion. What's the word we used? When you would have special meeting, the stake presidency would come and speak to the ward, and we'd have special meeting, ward conference.
Right.
And I remember we were talking about that one day in the High Council meeting, and I had an idea come to me about how to conduct those meetings. And they turned out to be very worthwhile, beautiful experiences for everybody. I think I told you about this one, the wife of one of my stake clerks. I asked her to tell me about her Laurel's class or whatever. And her answer was, I feel like what I'm doing is immoral, is either immoral or fattening, because I'm enjoying it so very much, she said. And those were very beautiful meetings we'd have for about an hour, and just being impressed. Now, what shall I ask this next person? It was not ever the same old thing over again, but ask them specific questions. Tell me about this, and they would respond. Those were very deeply meaningful meetings we would have.
I'm still here. Actually, I'm glad you called, Colin. Let's get your opinion, shall we?
Sounds like Colin's on the phone.
Yeah.
Mom is bloated.
Tell me about some of the ambiguities or contradictions in your life, if any.
He suggested we call the doctor, and we talked to him. He's on call in the ER, and we said, "Oh, have you seen our nephew Michael? Oh, here's his X-ray right here. Doesn't look like it's broken." But anyway, he wants Mom.
I'm listening to what they're saying.
Okay, we can pause for a second.
Yeah, let's do that.
Tell me about any ambiguities or contradictions in your life.
And I still feel too tired. So
I've had 3 or 4 experiences where, in the church capacity, where men have been very unhappy at me. And I felt like I was dealing fairly with them and that I was doing what was best for everybody and especially for them. And they would be very unhappy at me and complain openly. And I decided early on you can't argue about that kind of stuff. If they got a problem, you do everything you can to help them feel better about it. But that you don't get mad at them. There was one of the previous temple presidents was still on the staff at the temple, and we made a decision about how we're going to do some part of it, and we had on a regular basis we'd have meetings with all the sealers, and then we'd have a meeting with all of this or that. And this man was really angry. I remember him standing up and saying, "I think you men don't know what you're doing, and you need to follow the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law." And he was mad. And that was a great source of concern to me. I think he's still there working in the temple. I had to just shut it off and not argue with him.